Oh, goodness gracious. Amplifiers in my trunk. Good morning, community. How are you? Jenenne Macklin, speaker, wealth coach, and catalyst. Just stopping by today to check in on you. How are you? How's your life? How's your family? How's your children? How's school? How's business? How's your heart? How's your heart? How's your heart? How are you this morning? Yeah. How is your heart? How are you feeling? I really feel like the world was exhaling yesterday. It really felt like there was I really believe there was a collective holding our breath to see what would happen with the verdict yesterday. And so I'm just checking in on you. Who's here? Let me know. Let me see your name. Put it down there in the chat. Tell me your name, where you are. My regular people here. Hey, Kat, how are you? Carol, how are you? Parrish, how are you? I invited some of you to join me in my private group, Money and Wealth Mastery Group. I think I want to change that name to Living Money and Wealth Mastery. And some of you did, so I'm glad to see you there. But others of you, let me see you below. Who's here? How are you today? How are you? But I'm just checking in on you. I put a post on my Facebook page that said "Out of the Mouths of Babes" because it was truly a babe. And I looked at her this morning. She's a precious little girl. And she just simply said, get 4 words, get off of him. Get off of him. Yeah, 4 words. That's all she says, get off of him. Which seemed to have almost sealed the case. And it's interesting and it's sad because we know part of what happened is because there were so many cameras, there were so many people, there was such a long time that this process went on that there was no way he could really walk away. But for me, hear me out. You don't even need to get mad. You don't even have to respond to it. Just a different point of view. From the very beginning, I always felt like this was a divine assignment for everybody involved. I look at life different than many people, so don't get all upset with me. I just do. I look at life from a different perspective. And I know that we're all here on divine assignments and we all have specific things that we're doing. But those things that shift the world, really shift the whole planet, because it shifted the planet. I believe everybody had an inhale and they had an exhale yesterday. So everybody ends up being impacted by this. When I saw the first action that took place last year and I looked at Derek Chauvin's face, there was no look what I'm doing. There's no tough guy. I got a black man on the ground. There was none of that. He just held his knee on his neck and just stared into the camera almost. And even when I looked at George wasn't like, let me go. He wasn't trying to scream or anything. He was there saying, let me up. And it just felt like the two of them, those souls, I'm a metaphysician, those souls came here at that moment, at that time, for that situation to happen, to impact all of us across the world in a particular kind of way. Now, some people will get it, and certainly some people won't. Some people are like, well, that's what he gets, too bad, and they're wrong. There's no way he should be going to jail. And others will be like, yeah, he should be going to jail. It doesn't matter. What matters is what you feel inside of you. And it just, the way that you've seen things happen and it just seemed different to me. When I looked at his face, I looked at George Floyd's face, and then you have this little precious little girl, 9 years old last year, 10 years this year, who says, get off of him. And I realized in the moment that many people just don't know what's happening in other communities. They've set things up such with the red lining and everything that certain people live in certain areas and other people live in other areas. And some of those areas are nice. They have beautiful schools, wonderful stores, while there are other areas that have schools that aren't that well, have liquor stores every other block, have bail bondsmen every other block. And you don't realize that there are communities that are different. And there are things that are happening in other communities that are different than what's happening in yours. And it was built that that way. It was set up that way, that some communities would be somewhat sheltered, and we call them the suburbs, and they would have a lot of the, I guess, riffraff and whatever seems to go on in the inner cities, while other communities would, just be almost taken over with liquor stores and bail bondsmen and rundown buildings. And I realized when I watched that yesterday, I thought there's just a lot of people that just don't know. And it just takes me back to what Michelle was saying. We call her like she's our friend. Michelle Obama was saying when she was in office with her husband, because of course she wasn't in office, she said, where do we start? We start with getting to know our neighbors. We don't know each other. We don't know each other. And that's why the police, who are law enforcement, there's no laws for mental health on the streets. There's no laws for police officers to have the mental health training to deal with situations that have nothing to do with laws. So there's a gap in our system where social workers, where community leaders can step in, so that when there are problems in the community, you don't call the police, you call the community person. They would have known George, they would have known whoever, they would have worked it out. So this scenario shines a spotlight for many of us to see what's happening in our communities and to be willing to take a stand differently in our communities to get the resources we need. Every Black community in America needs a clinical social worker or a community liaison or advocate between them and the police department. It's just, we can't get around that, because sometimes when people call the police, that's not who they want. They want the mental health person. They want the nurse. We've had 2 situations already where the mom said, I called for mental health. I called for help, and the police came, and the person ended up getting shot. So these moments become turning points for us as citizens in this country, on this planet, in the United States of America, out here on space. How do we want to live going forward? How do we want to move through this world going forward? We all say, and unfortunately many probably believe it's true, this only came to light because there were so many, just like right now, cameras shining on it. If there hadn't been a camera on it, we wouldn't have seen it. But I also believe if it hadn't been for Derek Chauvin continuing to keep his knee where he kept it, it would not have come to light. So I know I look at life differently. I have more of a metaphysical view of looking at things happening for a reason. There are no accidents. Everything does happen for a reason. And a lot of times we may not understand it. But it just can help us fortify how we're going to move forward in getting to know each other, how we're going to move forward in helping others. I'm real clear. Other communities don't know what's happening in our communities, because you go to your community and you come home and you go out to work and you come home and that's it. You may never run through a community that's a poor community. You may never have anything to do with a poor community such that you understand and know what the circumstances are. But I guarantee you this, if you drive through what's considered a, quote, poor community, you will find a liquor store on every corner. Why is that? And you can go to other communities and there's no liquor stores every corner. Why is that? You'll find the bail bondsmen. You'll find people in other communities coming into the poor communities and setting up their stores. Why is that? Why doesn't the Black community have its own stores and businesses? Because the rent is more for us. The insurance is more for us. Getting loans is harder for us. I mean, it's systematic across the board. And the question still becomes, what are we going to do about it? I'm clear we're here on this planet for a reason. There are things that we can do. And the simplest thing right now is to get to know each other. Do you know your neighbor? Do you know the person who lives next to you? Do you know the people across the street from you? Or if you don't live in a house, then do you know your tenants above you that make noise and you just beat on the wall and tell them to be quiet? Or the tenants below you? We need to get to know each other so that when things come up, we can then stand for each other. I just visualize that in the communities like where I grew up in South Central Los Angeles on the corner of 108th between Main and San Pedro, if we had an emergency, we called someone, it would be a social worker or advocate who would show up, and we knew who that person was. And we could say, well, you know, John did such and such and such, and she would know who John is. And then Bill did this, and then that added to this. And she would know the people by name and know their histories, and she could talk to them and maybe calm them down, and she could make the assessment, or he, to then say, well, we do need to call the police, or you go to a mental health worker, or you go to the hospital. But we're missing gaps, and in those gaps, people are getting killed. And they're getting disproportionately killed because of the color of their skin, because the system that we live in, we all should know by now, we live in a system that does not support POC. The system of our, quote, founding fathers, I'm not sure they were mine, did not take us into consideration as human beings, 100% fully human beings. So everything that's been written in the constitutions and all the stuff has been written from the perspective of black people being less than. And that won't change until we change those documents. We're talking about the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment. We're still considered as less than. And unless we all recognize that, if we're less than, and you can say, oh, well, too bad for black people, we're not going to only ones be considered less than. Don't even begin to think that. It's anyone who's not a particular color that's less than. So to me, it just becomes a time for us, one, to really think within ourselves. How do we want to be in our own communities, the people we live around all the time, every day? How do we want to be in our own families? Family members we dislike or we give a hard time because their skin color is this way and our skin color is that way, or their hair is this way. We have our own internal prejudices. And then we take those internal prejudices and take them out into the world because we haven't examined our own. So what do we do to examine our own? What do we do to look what we're doing in our own families? And then what do we do to look at what's happening in our communities? Because I believe that's truly our number one mission here on the planet, is how do we get along? All the way back to Rodney King. Can we all just get along? And the answer is no, we can't, because so much is fed to us that separates us. We have to be willing to desire it within each of us. It must be something that we desire, to know the other person, to know beyond the outer appearance of them, to know the heart of who they really are. So then we can advocate for them. I mean, if I had to vision a world, that would be the world I would vision, that we would know each other, we pay attention to each other, that we would be able to understand, looking at someone, what they may or may not be going through, because we've known other people like them. So we have a sensitivity to them. We have an awareness to what they may or may not have been through. I mean, I was in Cancun about a couple of weeks ago to get away and make sure I could get on a plane safely. You know, and I look at the poor. There are poor people everywhere. Everywhere. We all have the same issues that we need to be dealing with and addressing. So I am really looking at this as a turning point. It can be a turning point, but it'll only be a turning point if we make it a turning point. If we turn the way we look at each other, if we're willing to turn just a little bit to look at someone and ask the question. Don't automatically assume. Don't automatically decide. Don't automatically, please stop believing anything you hear on the news in the United States, because it's being programmed so that they indoctrinate us to capitalism. Please follow your heart. Listen to your heart and trust it. If it says to you, give that person a ride, give them a ride. If it says to you, give that person some money, give them some money. If your heart says, share some food with that person, share some food. If it says, tell that person something because you have the knowledge, tell that person something because you have the knowledge. It's simply reaching that doggone olive branch that the Christians and everybody else seems to talk about to the person across from you. To have so much religion in this country, there is so much animosity, anger, frustration, mad, and pissosity. It's amazing to have so many religions in this country, and yet there's no peace. What's the religions for if we're not going to have some level of peace, even in our own families, not to mention out in the world? Which brings to mind, thank you, universe. The reason why we see what we see in the world is because of what's happening in our families. The families are the internal, and the world is the external. So what happens in here in our little families shows up actually in the world, in our bigger family, because you know we're all connected, right? You know that. If you've been listening to me for a year, all pandemic, I talked to you, we're all connected. There's a non-physical source that's keeping us all alive. It's not your mom and not your dad. So the more we're willing to connect to that non-physical source and recognize it as the source of all of our being on this planet, we can see we're all connected. When you hurt one person, you do hurt another. I think part of why we do what we do is because we think, oh, I'm separate and apart, so whatever I do to her, it won't matter. I'm just doing it directly to him. Yes, it does matter. It matters energetically. It matters energetically. I think I'm looking so crazy because I wasn't going to be on here. I don't know if I even washed my face or what. But anyway, we're all connected. And what you do to one does impact another one. If we just lived from that, if we just took some of the principles of the universe and lived from them, we would see different choices. We would see different solutions. We'd see different opportunities popping up for us. So I'm claiming this right here, right now, today, as an opportunity for us all to take, or like she said, take your foot off of him. All of us to take our foot off of each other. Stop criticizing each other. Stop giving each other a hard time. Stop believing everything you hear about black people and find out for yourself. Stop believing everything you hear about Mexican people or Asian people and believe it for yourself and make connections with people. Get to know them and honor them. Because as you honor them, you're honoring each of us and you're honoring yourself. We got work to do. And most of that is in the election process. And how we make that election work for us is we connect to the people we live with, so then we can talk about what we're going to vote about and maybe make some shifts and changes. It's all connected. We cannot make the shifts and changes on this planet without talking to each other and getting to know each other. And what are we so afraid of? If a black person walks up to an Asian person and says, hey, how are you? How are you doing? Tell me more about yourself. Why should that be frightening? But we won't ask. We want to go through the world with our little blinders on. Don't bother me. Just let me do what I want to do, live my dreams. And I get it, because we live in a capitalist country and it's all about me, 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 me. But we as individuals are not me, 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 me people. The universe, God, life, and the universe, however you define that, did not create us as me, me, me. We're in a country that's a me, me, me. When you go to socialists, it's we, we, we. Let's take care of each other. Let's look out for each other. When you go to, where else do we have what? In the Korean countries, they have theirs over there too, and right now it's slipping my mind. But just because the countries we live in is capitalist and the focus is on me, 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 doesn't mean we have to live that way. Because when we're in the trenches and we need help, it's the others like us who come to help us. When your car goes into the water and you need somebody to go out there and help you, it's us who helps you. It's not the communists, it's not the socialists, it's not the capitalists, it's the human being, us, that helps each other. So let this be an opportunity for us to dive into ourselves and figure out how do we help each other even more. So our 9-year-olds are not on the screen somewhere testifying in court that she simply said, take your foot off of it. So how are you? I'm good. I'm really good. I'm excited about the planet. I'm excited about what's happening. I'm excited that I guess it looks like things are opening up. I just came out of Trader Joe's. They had none of the stickers on the floor they used to have. I kind of miss them. I like the distance. I got tired of people being up on me in the grocery stores. Like, get back. Why you all up on me? But, things are changing. So we'll see what comes next. But ask yourself, what could I do differently? How can I be different in my world, in my community, to my coworkers, even to my own family and to my neighbors? If we could spread that around, because it's all going to happen in the elections. If you don't know it now. There's primaries. People are paying attention to them. I get so much marketing stuff from all the different Senate seats and all the young people who are running for office who need donations. It's on. And it's all going to happen through legislature, through these primaries, through all these bills being written in quiet and people signing off on them. That's where we need to put our attention, and that's where we need to put our focus. Let me know how you are. I see that Carla's watching. How are you, Carla? Hakeem is watching. How are you? Tammy, how are you? Tammy Brown. Willie, how are you? Alethea, how are you? Good to see you too, my dear. I'm just on here doing my morning rants. That's all. But I do invite you guys to join me in my wealth and money and wealth mastery group. I'm going to give you a date. I want you to join me on an interview that I'm going to have with Les Brown next week, and I want you to be a part of that. If you don't know Les Brown, you'll enjoy it. If you know Les Brown, then you'll enjoy it even more. Okay? Take good care. Please go to, www.JenenneMacklin.com. I have an audio there for you, Healing Your Relationship with Money. And I think we're going to be updating a new giveaway for you. I'll let you know what that is so you can go and get that at the website. So you can go get that at my website as well. Take good care. Let me know how you're doing. Bye for now.